process of discovery has done something to me in the prophetic thing that I move in. The prophetic comes in all different shapes and sizes. I've discovered that, there are people that know your telephone number. Not me. It's all right. You can leave it on. And there are people that know how you're feeling. There are people that... The thing that I seem to get more of than other things is I kind of understand people's destinies. I understand what they're made for, who they are, what the thing that... And that seems to be somehow related to me understanding more about who I am and how I work and all that kind of stuff. And so understanding the dreams of your heart is a really important part of growing in the prophetic. Okay? And I suppose what I've discovered and am discovering is that we are made... sometimes it's difficult to say things without sounding like a platitude or something you've heard in church a million times before, but yet is still something super important. Each one of us, every single person, expresses part of the dream of God's heart. There's something, it's like he chipped a little bit of himself off when he made you. And it's kind of... it's hard to overestimate. No, put it the other way around. It's really easy to underestimate the preciousness of what he made me, made you. And it when you start to understand yourself, you start to understand that better. So let's okay, going there a bit. So the things I'm going to try and cover are why dreams are important to both us and to the Lord, how we recognize the dreams and desires of our hearts, what we should do with them, what helps or hinders them coming to pass, what to do when our dreams have been crushed, which is an incredibly common experience, and how to position ourselves when our dreams come to fulfillment. So do you think that might take us half an hour or so? Okay, so the Bible's full of people with dreams. Peter announces on the day of Pentecost that old men will dream dreams, which is good because you have one in front of you. There are literal dreams, and which allowed Joseph to marry Mary, the wise men to avoid Herod, Joseph to take Jesus and Mary to Egypt, Pilate's wife to warn him about Jesus. There are visions, Cornelius sending for Peter, Paul going over to Macedonia. They're quite common, these things. It's not an unusual thing in the Bible. And then there are also dreams of the heart. Two of my favorite characters are Simeon and Anna at the beginning of Luke's Gospel. When Mary and Joseph take Jesus up to the temple. And they've been dreaming for this day. I'll stop this happening. They kind of represent the sort of the dreams of all the old covenant people for the Messiah. And as we know that in everyday speech we have two distinct ways of talking about dreams. They're on the one hand they're the most insubstantial thing we can think of. It's just a dream. He's a dreamer. And the implication is that you shouldn't trust your life to something so insubstantial. You know, be realistic, have your feet on the ground, all those kind of things. But there's this other sense where we have this idea that both nighttime dreams and the dreams of the heart can reveal something deeper about ourselves, about our lives, about the future. You know, we admire people who follow their dreams. And we recognize that, I don't know if you've read stories of sort of sportsmen or entrepreneurs or what, you know, who, or Martin Luther King, you know, I have a dream. And we recognize that however hard they are to catch hold of, they're somehow important. And, you know, you'll be familiar with Proverbs 29:18. Without a, it's often translated vision, but it means dream. Without a dream, the people perish. There's something life-giving about them. So I like to think of them as being, dreams are sort of like magnetic north in our lives. They're the things that show us where the real direction is. You know, we need maps. Actually, none of this sort of analogy works in this world of Google Maps, does it? You know, but probably half of you don't even know what a compass looks like. You know, anyone under 30, you know, you've got no idea. You've probably never seen a real compass. Anyway, it's a little round thing with a needle that, you know, anyway. You know, you need maps. Maps show you the practicalities of, you know, how you get from this stage to this stage to this stage to this stage. But to use a map, you have to get it the right way up. Those of us who are a bit older will probably remember arguments with our spouse in the car about where we are, you know, probably because the map's the wrong way up, you know, or we started from the wrong place. That it doesn't happen anymore. I know, you know, in the world of Google Maps, they've solved that problem. But trust me, it used to be a thing. You need a compass to orient the map. There's a guy called, you've probably never heard of him. Somebody actually sent me his biography in the post and said, I think you'll like this. I don't even know who it was. Probably someone in this room. You never know. Of a guy called Roland Evans. And there was this one phrase he had in it, which has stuck with me. And it's this: without a dream, we are lost to ourselves. Isn't that good? So we could put it like this. When we recognize and acknowledge our dreams, they tell us things about ourselves and our identity, who we're created to be, that we cannot know in any other way. So why are dreams important to the Lord? I think it revolves around this. So the Lord has given us this privilege to be co-laborers with him. That's in 1 Corinthians 3:9. If you're taking notes, you can have these notes afterwards if you want. And I think it's funny to think of the Lord having dreams, but I think he has dreams too. You hear it, you overhear it in Jesus every so often. Will I find faith on the earth when I come back? That's his dream, that he'd find faith on the earth. And he shares that. He has given us that ability to dream. And he's also made himself accommodating. No, that's the wrong word. He enjoys joining in with our dreams. He's given us, because we're in his image, he's given us genuine creativity. It's not just, we do what he's given us to do. He's given us genuine creativity. Jesus says, ask what you want and it will be done for you. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you want. Sometimes dreams do come directly from God. Jacob had a literal dream that all the people of the earth would be blessed through his family. Sometimes it's a combination of God's dream and our response. I don't know if you remember, Solomon has this interchange with God in a dream. He talks to and fro with God in the dream, and he asks for wisdom. You'll remember that one. Sometimes dreams are from people, they start in people's hearts. Moses had a dream that God's people would be set free. David had a dream to build a dwelling for God on earth. Simeon, as I say, had a dream that he'd see the Messiah. This is a wonderful quote from Wesley. This is Wesley's dream. I continue to dream and pray about a revival of holiness in our day that moves forth in mission and creates authentic community in which each person can be unleashed through the empowerment of the Spirit to fulfill God's creational intentions. Isn't that good? Yeah. See, it's worth it just for that. Yeah, sure. I continue to dream and pray about a revival of holiness in our day that moves forth in mission and creates authentic community in which each person can be unleashed through the empowerment of the Spirit to fulfill God's creational intentions. Good, isn't it? I could stop right there. The interesting thing about David's dream, you see, God says to David, whereas it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. So interesting that, isn't it? It's not I told you to do it. It was in your heart to do it. It's fascinating because it's not prophesied in the Old Testament, the building of the temple. It's like, there are lots of things that are, but not the building of the temple. So, how do dreams and desires come, and how do we recognize them when they do? I think it's impossible to spend time in God's presence without dreams and desires sort of coming to the surface. So, a few kind of tips. The first thing, our desires are always shaped by the things that we spend time with. So, if you spend all your time looking at brochures for holidays, that will be the thing that, you have a desire for. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, not the holidays, but, just spending time with God, godly dreams and desires will arise in our hearts. The second thing is to do with... Sorry, I just need to blow my nose. Is to do with disappointment, to do with expressing dreams. As I said, the thing about dreams is that they are very insubstantial. And actually, I was coming up on the tube, and I saw this extraordinary ad for something called. Have you seen this ad on the tube? It's called Dream Camera, and it said, "We have developed technology to recover your dreams when you forget them. Ring this number. I thought, that is the strangest ad. Maybe I was dreaming it. It was really peculiar. But I thought, oh, that's a truth, that everybody, you forget your dreams. Do you ever forget your dreams? Well, there's a deep truth in there. You forget your dreams. It's easy to forget your dreams. Writing them down is important if you want to remember them. But there's also a dynamic in the world, which I'm not sure I can quite fully express this or grasp this, where the world and the flesh and the devil are against our dreams because they are an expression of God's person, character, representation in the world. We have to be unconcerned about other people's opinion to really express our dreams. I mean, it was interesting just getting you to put your hands up at the beginning about the prophetic. It's hard often to actually acknowledge our own, who we are, what God's made us, because it feels presumptuous, it feels maybe we're not, maybe it's I'm getting this wrong. Do you know all that stuff? It's hard to do that, but when we do, and it does something very special to us and to how we carry ourselves in the world. So I came across this lady as a writer called Elizabeth Bowen. She's not a Christian writer, I don't think. And she said this: when you love someone, all your saved up wishes start coming out. Do you think that's nice? You know that thing when you fall in love with someone, you want to tell them who you are. You ever had that experience? That's kind of the heart of prophecy. We'll talk about that a bit more in the second session, because that's what God does to us. So, do you like autocorrect errors? You know those things when you no? Do you like these? Here's my favourite: boyfriend to girlfriend. This is a text message. Good morning. You are beautiful and amazing. I love you and dream about the Führer. OMG, I mean the future. Sorry, I just had to. Can you imagine receiving that as a text? That'd be pretty ghastly, wouldn't it? Anyway. So the thing is that whether we let our dreams come to the surface is related to how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about God in our hearts. When we experience His love, His safety, His protection, when we feel His goodness, we're free to dream because it's safe. So back to the compass needle. This is for all the over 30s here. A compass, an old-fashioned compass, sits in an enclosure usually with oil or water in it, and which stabilizes the whole thing and protects the whole thing. And without that, the compass needle would just get knocked around all over the place. It's only when it's safely enclosed that it can find north. And it's the same with us. So, how do we recognize the dreams of our hearts? So here are a few ways they can come to us. Someone's doing something, talking about something, or you're reading something, and in your heart you just have that moment of recognition and you go, that's me. I know this is for me. Maybe God speaks to you directly in a prophetic word or a nighttime dream, and it just lands. It might be that you go somewhere, or you're in a particular circumstance, and you just feel alive in a different way than you felt before. There are lots of other ways, I'm sure, but there's a few thoughts. This isn't something, you can't find out these things in a book. You can't take a survey. These are the things that you just know that you know. As John Wimber used to say, you know it in your knower. So, how do we relate to our dreams? Paul writes to Timothy, and he says this: Timothy, my son, I'm giving you this command in keeping with the prophecies once made about you, so that by recalling them, you may fight the good fight. We fight better when we recall our dreams. So, I remember listening to a guy called Danny Silk. Do you know who he is? Yeah. Give a talk about dreams, and he said that he likes to make a list of his dreams. And he has spiritual dreams, and he has, just things he'd love to do, one of which I think was to sleep in the White House by invitation. And I remember hearing this talk, this was years ago now, and I thought, I must do that. And I wrote down a list of things. And this is, can't even remember, 7 or 8 years ago. And my list had, and dreams can be, don't restrict yourself. When you do this, just write down anything. They don't have to be realistic. That's the beauty of dreams. They can be totally unrealistic, probably should be. That's why they're dreams. And so my list had to own a beautiful boat, to live in a pretty house on the water, to be raising up a generation of burning ones, and to have a teaching ministry. Well, I can tell you every single one of those has come true since then. Amazing. The funny thing is, the house on the water is actually a boat. I live on a boat. So, and we had no idea we were going to do that when I wrote that down. Expressing our dreams is important. There's no creativity without vulnerability. And expressing our dreams makes us vulnerable. But we do need to be a bit careful about who we express our dreams to. Joseph, as you probably remember, was somewhat premature in expressing his dream to his brothers, and but God meant it for good. But expressing our dreams makes a declaration over our life, and it helps us to navigate life. So life is full of options. If we know what our dreams are, it helps us to decide between options. So things come at us, options come at us all the time, and we can always go, does this take me close to my dream? No. Does this one take me close to my dream? No. Does this one take me close to my dream? Yes. It's a way of judging between stuff. Should I go this way or that way? Another thing dreams do is they plant the seeds of our destiny. There's always a gap. Alan and I were talking about this at lunchtime. There's always a gap between a dream coming and it being fulfilled. And it's usually a pretty difficult gap. It's very unusual. Although I have heard some stories of things happening very quickly, but it's very unusual, I would say. Dreams, what seems to happen is God plants something in our hearts and then puts all kinds of things in the way maybe it's to toughen up the dream, to make us really want it, appreciate the value of it when it comes to fulfillment. But the beginning of this process is the easy bit. It's the bit in between that's I can't think of a polite word. It's the difficult bit, okay? Dreams pretty much always take us to a costly and difficult place. The father's dream was to save the world, and it cost him his son. So, let's think about some things that can go wrong. Dreaming makes us vulnerable because it opens us up to disappointment. As it says in Proverbs 13:12, hope deferred does what? Makes the heart sick. So, we often have genuine questions about whether a dream is from God. And I've met lots of people who tell you their dream and you go, I don't think that's from God at all. That's completely bonkers. And I very rarely say that to people because sometimes bonkers dreams are from God and that's just me, And the only person that can judge that ultimately is you. However, trusted friends are a great help in... Sorry, turn my phone off, it's doing things. Yes. Trusted friends are a great help in discerning these things, but you need to pick carefully. Another thing, learning to deal with disappointment, deal well with disappointment, is one of the keys to seeing our dreams come to pass. Do you remember the story in Exodus 15 when the Israelites have just come out of Egypt? They're in this very hot, dry desert, and they need water. And they come to a place called Marah, where there's water, but it's bitter. Bitterness is what happens to us when we don't get what we expected or wanted. It doesn't have to happen to us, but it often does. And it's connected with offense and disappointment. And bitterness stops us being able to drink. And dreams never, ever get fulfilled from a place of bitterness. So you can't, if you're grumbling inwardly about why am I here, why didn't this happen, why is my life so difficult, why am I going to this dreadful church, why am I, not this church of course, why is my spouse so difficult, why are my children so difficult, why are my parents so difficult, all that stuff. We have to get to the bottom of it. We have to deal with it. We have to sort it out with the Lord. Moses, you probably remember this story. Moses asks God what to do. God shows him a log to throw in the water. The log represents the cross. You have to find forgiveness, and then you can go on. So maybe we're not bitter, but our dreams are still not being fulfilled. Let me just talk about the issue of favour a little bit. You remember it says in 1 Samuel that Samuel grew in favour with the Lord and with the people. And Jesus, it says, after the incident in the temple when he, gets left behind, it says that he obeyed his parents and he grew in favour. Jesus, Son of God, grew in favour with God, that's what it says, and all the people. You need favour to step into the dreams that God has for you. So, how do we find favour? Honour others. Peter says, honour all men. Quite a tall order, I think. Yes, I get a few nods from the audience. Honour all men, particularly people over you. Joseph honoured Pharaoh. Daniel honoured the megalomaniac Nebuchadnezzar. They both found favour. Acknowledge anointing on other people. I'm thinking of the Shunammite woman. She honoured Elisha. And she'd obviously dreamt of having a son, but the dream had died. But she honoured the prophet, and she got the prophet's reward, which in this case was a son. Cool, huh? Use the gifts that God has given you for the benefit of those around you, whoever they are. So if you're a prophet or have prophetic gifts, just don't wait to prophesy to someone important. Prophesy to whoever God puts in front of you. If mercy is your gift, be merciful to whoever God puts in front of you. Don't distinguish. I like this quote from Lance Wallnau. He puts it like this: whenever you invest your dominant gift in the lives of those closest to you, God rewards you with a divine appointment that puts your gift on display before those who can compensate you far more than the circle you initially served. And he's thinking particularly of Joseph, of course, who, Joseph is prophetic, and he comes from a dream-interpreting family. They're all dream interpreters. He didn't need to tell his brothers what his dream meant. They were just angry with him. They knew, They didn't need to go to a conference to find out. But Joseph, despite being in prison, was quite happy to interpret the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. He just went on doing what God had given him to do because it was what God had given him to do. Next stop, Pharaoh's court. He ends up as Prime Minister of Egypt because he wasn't bothered about who he did it for. Do it without looking for advancement. Next one, invest in the dreams of those over you. Again, Joseph is the example of this. Sometimes we get frustrated that people don't see us, don't recognize us, don't recognize our gifts. And that can lead to, well, I've done this, maybe some of you might have done this, expressing our dreams, what we want to do, what we're about, more forcefully so that other people see them. Not a good idea. Joseph tried it with his brothers. He thought if he just told them his dream, they'd all go, oh, God, yeah, Joseph is amazing, and all bow down to him. But it didn't quite work like that. It wasn't until Joseph was fully invested in Pharaoh's dream that mysteriously his dream came to pass. It's in the process of bringing Pharaoh's dream to pass by feeding his population. I mean, Pharaoh had had a literal dream. And it was by Joseph investing in his dream, Pharaoh's dream, that his own dream of his brothers bowing down to him came to pass. Now, it might sound easy, it might not sound easy. I don't think this is easy at all. But it's very difficult, I think. What time are we supposed to stop? What time? Tea time. This is like, have you been reading in the papers about this Norwegian island where they've decided to abolish time? Because it's 3:30 it says on the programme, thank you. Apparently it's very, very far north and they have 6 months in the daytime and 6 months of nighttime, and they had a town meeting and they've just decided to abolish all concept of time. Isn't that sweet? It's a Norwegian island. It's called Holy Trinity Swiss Cottage. Maybe I should have done that with a Norwegian accent. Holy Trinity Swiss Cottage. 3:30. Yeah, it's all right. I'm coming to. We won't have time to do practical this time, but I'll finish this because I think there's stuff here for you. Okay. So the second half of that verse that we had earlier from Proverbs, in Proverbs 13, is a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. God wants us to see our dreams fulfilled. God is more excited about our dreams than we are. Oh, I got to the end. I haven't quite got to the end. I've got one more little bit. Has anyone got any questions? Yeah, okay. Okay, so you never know when you're going to have an encounter with God, do you? Or you never ever know. These things happen. My favourite story from my own life, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? Never mind. Actually, it didn't happen that long ago. It was about, I'm only telling this because it's a funny story. About 6 or 7 years ago, a friend of mine invited me to go. Actually, I need to be careful because I'm about to be rude about a prayer meeting, so I just need to just anonymise it appropriately. A friend of mine asked me to go to a prayer meeting somewhere outside London, and I kept going, I really don't want to go to this, I really don't want to go to this. Anyway, he kept going on about it and eventually said, oh, all right, I'll come. So on a very wet weekday morning, I can't think how I managed it. Anyway, I drove to this place, and it was in the suburb of a little town, and it was in a rather dismal URC church, and it was wet and it was cold, and I got there, and when I walked through the door, I thought, I've just walked into a complete madhouse. And this woman came beetling up to me and said, oh, Joan of Arc's just appeared in the meeting room down the corridor. And I thought, oh, crikey, here we go. Anyway, it just went on like this. And I thought, okay, so deep breath. Anyway, so the meeting was about to start, and it was a room about this size, and I thought, I'll go and sit right at the back, and then, we'll do the worship, and I'll go, and no one will notice, and it'll be fine, So I go and sit at the back, and the lady who's running it said, do you come and sit at the front? I said, no, I'm perfectly happy here, thank you. So the worship starts, and the Spirit of God came on me so powerfully, I couldn't move. I was absolutely stuck. And I sat there all morning, unable to move. It was absolutely extraordinary. It was a very important encounter in my life. It was weird. Anyway, so you never know, do you? Sorry? I didn't see Joan of Arc, no. I was not granted that. And she may have been. I couldn't move though, so I couldn't get down the corridor to find her. No. Yes. Oh yeah, there was with it's kind of hard, isn't it? I don't know. There's a certain authority that's come on me since then, which is which I recognise and don't talk about, but it's kind of, I know it's there. And go on. Yeah. I think, yes, so the question was, how did I know that I had a prophetic gift? Okay. So, I was sort of converted into, I went to a meeting, I was an atheist, and I went to a meeting that Jackie Pullinger did, and do you know who she is? Okay. And I didn't know what I was going to. I remember turning to the chap next to me in the meeting. I said, do these happen every Sunday afternoon? He looked at me as if I was a complete idiot. And she talked for 2.5 hours. Count yourself lucky, okay? And then at the end she said, if anyone wants to pray to speak in tongues, they should come up to the front. I thought, this is crazy, I'm going. So I left, very sharpish. And on the way out, I went, I wonder if I can do that. And just started praying in tongues, which was kind of weird. So I had a slightly odd introduction to the Christian life. I didn't know that Jesus had died for my sins or anything, you know. So I was sort of, I would kind of went straight into sort of charismatic things. And then the first meeting I went to, sorry, I'm on a roll now. The first meeting I went to was a little home group. I was at university, not a home group. It was just a group of guys in a room. And they were playing guitars. I'd never been to anything like this before, you see. Then in the middle of, they were sort of what I would now call worshipping. I didn't know what they were doing. They were singing and playing. And this chap reaches round, puts his arm round me. And I go, oi, oi. I'm not answering your question, though. I suppose, I don't know, I always wanted to. I think is about as much as I can say. I always wanted to prophesy. And I sort of, I used to be rather envious of people that, the other thing was I spoke in tongues, but I wasn't sure it was a proper tongue because no one had prayed for me and no one had sort of, stamped me off as being okay, do you know? And so for years after really a long time afterwards, I didn't really believe it was real, I thought I was just making it up. And then, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later maybe, I remember I was at, I used to go to HCB in those days. I still do, now and again. And I was training as an accountant, and the girl who was on the course with me was a Christian. She was very, very uptight, and she got a first from Oxford in philosophy, and she was kind of super clever, but super, And she came to church, and she said at the end, would I pray for her to pray in tongues? And in those days, we sort of prayed, blokes played for girls, and, we hadn't got all this kind of safeguarding stuff we have now, Anyway, so I kind of thought, this is really embarrassing, so let's go down into the crypt, which was under the church. So we went into the crypt, and there's still lots of people around, so we went into a room off the crypt. So I'm in this room with this girl. And then the vicar suddenly comes in and kind of looks at us, and I'm thinking, oh, help, what does he think, Anyway, he got all embarrassed and walked out, so I'm still left, and I'm praying, and it's just incredibly tense and awkward and whatever. And she suddenly starts singing in tongues at the top of her voice. I mean, like, singing and singing and singing, and it's like snot's pouring down, You know how it goes sometimes in long sort of ribbons with sort of bits in it? It was absolutely disgusting. And she was crying and singing, and I'm going, God, this really works. So that was that's how I think that's the first time I thought, this is for real, And then, I don't even really remember. I used to, sometimes in meetings, I'd get this feeling I should speak in tongues and give a tongue, and, we'd wait for the interpretation and things. And I think it was probably through tongues and interpretation that I first started. And sometimes I would sort of know what the tongue was, so I went on doing this for, quite a while, and da-di-da. But it's probably only... Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's not like a clear thing. It was. I can remember. I eventually ended up joining the Vineyard when it started in the UK, and I remember going to a conference somewhere, and I was praying for someone, and I started. We were just praying for them. I just had this kind of unction, and it kind of like came out more than just me, and I didn't know that's what the prophetic felt like. But I remember. John Mumford, who was standing by, kind of going, "No, go on, you keep going, keep going, keep going." And that, I suppose, was the first time I can really remember what it felt like. And, I've never really thought about this before. It's just something that's kind of happened over the years. But it's kind of come and gone, and it's only really when I've believed. It's only really when I believed my dream, that it's become a steady thing. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my dream. I was telling Alan a little bit about this at lunchtime. About 2 years, 18 months after I became a Christian, someone introduced me to the Song of Songs. And I read it for the first time, and I had this weird feeling. I remember reading that verse about, "You've captured my heart with one glance of your eyes." And I suddenly had this kind of feeling inside, and I knew that Jesus was in love with me. And it was the strangest feeling. And I thought, he's a bloke, I'm a bloke. This is weird. And but that stuff around that is the dream of my heart, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about that in the next session, because I think it's super important. But it's like when I've really got the hang of that's my thing. That the prophetic is now an easier thing. I'm not really a prophet. I'm probably more apostolic than prophetic. I prophesy. It's probably not my top gift, actually. But anyway, there you go. You got the wrong bloke. What were you going to say?
One thing that everybody wants God to use them.
Yeah.
Right. And you think so dreaming or something you do.
Yeah.
You keep on doing maybe personally, it was like something I do evangelism, like the witness to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you also even think that you hear the voice of him telling you exactly, say a call or something, not once or twice, and you just think that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be a bachelor, you know that thing. And you think you are doing what supposed to carry on doing that. And you carry on evangelism.
Yeah.
You thought you are doing what it calls you to do. But how do you come a strategy? For somebody came to say, "Oh, the Lord says you are not obeying my call." So how do you do a strategy? What God calls you to do?
What's the strategy?
Yes.
2 words. Follow me. It's not. I don't think. I mean, you can be. Of course, we need to be strategic and sensible and think about things. And God's given us gifts to do all of that stuff. Of course, that's important. But I think there's a general misunderstanding about ministry. That successful ministry is the reward, and it isn't. The reward is Jesus. And that's he is the reward. There is nothing. How could there be any reward that was better? And it's like when we're happy to look at him and to him to look at us, and just to be happy, that's it. In that place, weird stuff happens. Things fall into place. I mean, I can. Do you want another story? All right, another story. Okay. It's not really for publication, this one, but I'll kind of so. Oh yeah, you probably shouldn't put this on the tape. So